And here we are. Hello, Emmy. I see you're still on breakfast or lunch maybe already. Quick snack for the coffee meeting. That's fair.
Hmm.
Biscuits. Biscuits. So today we're going to talk about 3, 2, 1. Bam. Look at that. Just upping our game in the design from a design perspective, week over week. What, did
Amazing.
I have a typo? So I think obviously we talk a lot about this UX, UI, all kinds of stuff. So I thought this week would be kind of interesting to dive into that a little bit, really from less of the visual design, I think, more of the what does that mean user centric, right? And kind of help us think through um, who the user is and why do we design for them versus for us versus for the product. What does that all mean? I did invite a whole bunch of other people, actually, all of them designers in one way or another. Of course, we know they are busy professionals, so hopefully one or two of them can join us some point in the next hour, and we get some good feedback from people who actually know that space. But for now, maybe we'll just start with talking about, what does that mean? Like if you hear that for you with your new business, right? So you're working on a impact business right now. I think carefully saying that you probably already have like two customer personas you have to think about.
Hmm.
So when you think about customer centric or user centric design, what do you think that means for you, or for broader sense maybe?
Yeah, I think in a way I'm currently kind of trying to struggle through it and, thinking about my website and all of that, like just how everything is going to be displayed so that whether you're um, someone who wants to shop or someone who's interested in the business from a different angle, it's very clear what we're doing and how you're going to accomplish that through the website. And then we have an even more difficult layer added that a lot of the people that visit might be seniors. So um, it really needs to be even clearer and easy to navigate to make their experience just perfect from the beginning.
So give people a quick refresher, just like your elevator pitch. What is it you're working on?
Yeah, okay. So Gigless Garments aims to reduce textile waste by extending the life cycle of secondhand clothing. We do that by diverting um, t-shirts, leggings, sweatshirts, things like that from the landfill that can't be sold on the floor as secondhand and turning them into yarns, which we then have a line of products that we have senior partners who knit or crochet them into lovely products that makes a useful eco-friendly alternative to readily available purchasable items.
Okay. So you said you kind of almost skipped over that part with the senior partners, right? So, but you're partnering with, our elderly population,
Right.
kind of tapping into the skills they might already have, such as knitting and crocheting,
Yeah, and the
to make.
beneficial aspects of crafting and working with your hands and
Right, right. All right, I'm excited. We do have one designer officially joining us here as well today. Super
yay.
cool. Hey, Patrick.
Servus.
Hey, how's it going?
How you guys doing?
Good. So look, design is it's I know user-centric design is something else but UI, but look at my UI skills here. What are we talking
Oh,
about today?
Oh wow.
Quick refresher. I'm gonna have to do this every time someone new joins today.
that's nice though. That's nice.
So we just started kind of talking about it. Just so you realize, I don't know if you're aware, these sessions are live streamed. Just so you know. And I just asked Emmy kind of what her take is on, designing with your users in mind, right? Like primarily, and she just gave the elevator pitch, which you missed, about what her new business actually is. So, Emmy, just do it again for good measure.
Okay. Giglets Garments aims to reduce textile waste by extending the life cycle of secondhand clothing. The way we do that is we divert your used clothes from the landfill by taking t-shirts, leggings, sweatshirts, anything that's not desired or wearable as is to be resold, and turning it into yarn. And then we partner with senior creators in senior living spaces in the local area. And we have a range of products that they can then create by knitting or crocheting them into usable, lovely products that people want to buy and are eco-friendly and sustainable.
Oh, that's really, really interesting to see, because I think that's also a very new idea, right? So I never saw, I mean, when people talk about reutilizing or recycling, it's always like, cut everything and make this almost as a raw material again, but you're really reimagining what to do with this material.
Right, and when you do those like heavily processed processes to really break down the contents of the fabric, you're reintroducing microplastics into the water, dyes into the water. So this is like a super low effort way that we just convert it right then and there into a material that is ready to be used. So it's really awesome.
Wow, that's impressive. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks for sharing.
So for that, right? So this is kind of a bit more of a untraditional business, I guess. From a lot of times you talk about, user-centric design might be, okay, an app, where's the button supposed to be, or something like that, right? Versus for Emmy, it's completely different to think about, who is the user, how is the user interacting with my brand, with my products, and what should I consider in that design phase, right? Which she is actually kind of in the middle of right now. So, but before we go down this road, actually, you as a designer, Patrick, I think your entire professional career, right? That is what you have been doing. So give us your interpretation of what does user-centric design mean for you?
Okay, that's not an easy task, and without much preparation, but just sharing from heart, right?
Right.
I think that's quite interesting. I'll try to be short and concise. That's a topic that we could spend hours and hours talking about.
Of course.
But I think one of these main things is, because that's also connected with like where UX or design differ from art, right? So in art, you are trying to do something for fruition, and you are trying to put your thoughts out and so on. I mean, there are a couple of people that write about it, and there are a lot of diversion about these ideas. But basically, people also ask like, art and design, is that the same, and so on. So there are a lot of artistic characteristics or behavior that we do when we're doing design, but that's just part of the ingredients to achieve something, right? But one of the main things with design is to get a task done. And normally it's communicating one idea, right? So that's what makes this quite different than art. And of course, art does communicate. I would be very dumb to like, art doesn't communicate. No, of course. But then the creator is less concerned about making sure that the communication goes through one path, right? It's like, I put a piece out, and then you may interpret that different than Sven and so on. And that's fine, and that is expected because guys have different background and all those things, right? When I talk about design, normally there's a task to be accomplished, and you are the mediator. You're trying to help to get somebody from not knowing this about knowing, or even eventually taking action, right? And we may use a lot of crafts from art to achieve this goal, but the goal is very measurable. Right? That's one thing. So that's just a quick take on like this difference, right? And that gets more complicated because then you are putting people at the middle of this equation, right? So now you are doing things, you are trying to communicate. When you're trying to communicate, you're communicating a message that is maybe not your message, but maybe your customer's message or your product message to somebody that is not you, right? So then that's very important to know who we are communicating with, because these people, they have different ways to read, to understand, to acknowledge, to save what you mentioned or the message that you mentioned, and so on. They have many different drivers to take actions or not. They have many ways to interpret it, like, oh, is that something that I care about now, or I care about this later? So there are a lot of layers of ways that people interpret that, and a lot of different needs. So then that's become a very important task to understand for who you are creating this piece, whether if it's a poster or more like an interactive piece, or if it's even design a system, like this SaaS design that you are designing the entire ecosystem, not talking about an app, for instance, right? So it doesn't matter what exactly you're designing, you are designing to somebody, or to solve some need for somebody, right? So then it's very important that you understand who these people are. Otherwise, you may fail on this communication or on your task. So that's one thing. And understanding who they are also has a lot of different flavors. So you may need to understand, like, do they have this need? Do they recognize they have this need? Because maybe you feel they have this need, maybe they don't. Or you feel they have this need, they do, but they don't even recognize this as a need. So if they don't recognize this as a need, they do other tasks that are for them more important than this one, right? So who we are designing for? Do they really? What are their needs? Do they understand that they have these needs? What are the solutions that they already use today to solve their needs? That can also be an indicator of, like, how important is this need? Because let's say I have a need for food, and then I go and I hunt. So clearly that's a strong need for me, because I wouldn't go to the wild and try to kill an animal, or be killed by an animal, if it was not that important, right? So how important is this need for them? And that's another thing. So that's connected with, like, which other offers they have and what they use, or they already use something to solve this need. So that can also talk a lot about the importance, but also can give you hints of different paths that people tried those things before, right? And so the list goes on and on. Like, we can have a long section just about how to understand these user needs. But basically, the message is you need to understand: do they really have a need? Do they understand this need? And hello, and also that will help you to design your piece, and later on you can validate this with them, right? Because again, one thing is doing all this pre-work of understanding who these people are, and then there are so many techniques: user persona, user stories, user journey. Again, the list goes on and on. But then after you have all of this, that's more like discovery. Do they really have this problem, and how they solve this problem today? Then you go back, and then you go to after your design discovery, you go for your concept design phase and so on. You may look at different examples. You may come with innovative ideas. Look at examples that have nothing to do with this task, because you may find something innovative there. A lot of brainstorming and so on. Then you come up with hypotheses, right? So then now you have ideas that potentially may or may not work, may or may not help them. Then who will tell if it works or not? They will, not you, right? So then that's important to go back to them and say, look, based on, at least you already know, you already separate the audience that matters to you or the one that doesn't matter, because the people that doesn't have this need, it's not even worth it to spend your time and their time to test those things out, right? So if you really found there is a need, if you found there is a public for this need, try to come up with your concepts, go back to them. And when you go back to them, go back as quick as you can, with as rough as you can, that at least show a meaningful idea that they can interpret it, right? But don't spend time developing everything and then going there, because more often than not, 110% out of 100, just making a joke that you'll be wrong, right? And doesn't matter how smart you are, they are different than you. So put your things out there, and you see, like YC, they keep pushing, like, prototype and test, prototype and test, prototype and test, and that's a real thing. And there is nothing wrong to test something and see it doesn't work. What is wrong is spend too much time and see this doesn't work. So now you are in trouble, right? So quick iterate those things, get the feedback, keep improving. So and get their help, because at the end they will be the one that will give the green light to approval, like, oh, I want to use that or not, right? I think that's, I mean, so talking about a lot of different items, but I think if you ask, like, oh, what exactly this user-centric design is putting the user in the center. Of course, you need to take consideration of all the other topics, business needs, technical needs, is that possible to implement, and so on. But a main piece that you cannot miss is really this user piece, right? So at the end, you are designing for somebody that needs to validate. Doesn't matter how great your technology is, or how awesome you believe a product is. If people don't have the same feeling that, oh, this helps to solve my need, they are not going to use it. You're going to spend money and time and and that's not going to be worth it, right? So that's a little bit of a long story short.
Yeah, that's really cool. So it's hard to actually try to summarize this, right? Actually, before I do this, let me just quick introductions. Liz, Patrick is a lifelong designer himself, so guys, you guys are a good connection here. Liz is currently going through the Springboard program to become a designer. So
Nice.
I'm excited to have you guys both on both of your levels of the journey here. And I think to try to summarize real quick your kind of definition, and that's a hard question, right? Like, give me a quick definition of what user-centric design is. But I think it depends on what it's really important to understand who it is, the user, right? That I think I would argue that's probably the most important thing. If you don't know, if you don't understand who your users are, then everything else probably, from my naive, non-designer brain, is more likely to be wrong, right out of the gate, right? Because of course, if you're designing something, I don't know, if you're designing a soccer ball for a golf pro, then it doesn't matter how good the soccer ball is, right? Because golf pro doesn't want a soccer ball.
Yeah.
Silly example.
But it happens. That happens a lot.
Yeah. So understand who they are, what their needs are, and this is actually an interesting one. Maybe you can spend a minute on this, because I think oftentimes, so I'm an engineer, right? So, and as the engineers, I think we are even more likely to make this mistake to come up with a solution for a need before we even understand if there is a need for that, or if there is even a specific customer who has that need, right? Because I don't know, for whatever reason that might be. So I think understanding if there is a true need, and then if that customer has that need. So you guys might have heard me talk about before the DAP triangle. I call it the DAP triangle, the domain, audience, and problem, right? And you kind of need to have all three of them to make it work. So the audience is your user, right? Who are they? The domain is what is the problem space you're solving something in. So the golf, for example, and the golf pro. And then the problem is that the golf pro doesn't have a soccer ball, right? Obviously a terrible problem, assumption at least here. So what do you guys think about that? Like how should we approach, especially in startups, right? Understanding our user, and then from early on trying to communicate with them. Because of course, what we don't have the luxury usually at with startups is to already have tons of users, which we can ask, right? Once we have 100 or 1,000 or 100,000 users, we can experiment with them, right? And I think, Facebook does it, I don't know, 1 million times a day. They test everything all the time, right? Every little thing. But they have, billions of users. How do you approach this from a new product, new project perspective, and trying to incorporate your potential users right from the beginning, and testing that who also, as well as the need right from the get-go?
I will at least talk. Yeah.
Yeah, Liz, what's the textbook answer for that? What do they teach you?
I'm not sure what the textbook answer would be. I can just answer from my own experience. But you can always start talking to people at any point, even if they're not already using your product. You can already start talking to people and find out what they're needing from those conversations. But it's also really hard to talk to people about future things they haven't done, because people generally, they can't tell what they're going to do in their future, or they often will speak about their future in a more positive way, talking about things that they would do, but they really wouldn't. So you have to be careful with that. But just starting conversations, I would say. Then you can find out if people would really use it, what people's problems are that they're trying to solve. And it just is a continuation off of those conversations.
Yeah,
That would be my
Patrick?
short, quick answer.
No, go ahead, Amy.
I just wanted to
Yeah, go ahead.
respond to that really quickly. I noticed that I have a little bit of a chicken and an egg problem with this. Like I want everything to be perfect before I start reaching out to people, but also I want to be able to incorporate people's feedback into what I'm building. So it's like I can't do both, right? I need to just start getting that feedback and not focus on perfection, I guess. Something like that.
I love that you say that right now, because that's kind of the second part of my title for today's topic, right? Is how much do you design? How much are you gonna like engineer, right? Like I called it over engineering for a reason. It's like, how much time do you put in before you start talking to people? And I think Liz is right. Of course, you can't just start talking to people, but if you have nothing yet, then you have that trust problem, right? It's like, well, is he or she just talking, or what are we talking about? Helping them to understand what you're talking about. I think that's where communication, like Patrick said, is, you know, a big aspect of design itself, right? Helping you actually making that point and testing your bigger business hypothesis, maybe. So where do you start, and where do you, and how do you know that you might be doing too much of one thing? Because correct me if I'm wrong here, or if you think differently from a designer's perspective, it's an iterative process, right? You design a little bit, you go out and test it.
You can make an MVP and test something small to see if your idea is working.
Yeah, and I agree, but I think that it's also something that happens before that. That is, see, there are different layers when we're talking with people, right? One of them is like you already have a strong opinion and eventually even an MVP or a strong hypothesis about it and so on. So then the question that we're trying to solve then is, oh, does my piece help you to solve the problem? And then you can show them something, like either MVP or just a paper prototype or something. But these are based on the assumption that they do have this problem, right? So of course, in this level, you already validate that they have the problem. But I would say very likely at the beginning, you may need to look at like just early talking, even without prototyping anything. Who has this type of problem? Is there a valid problem, right? So there's this concept of job to be done. Does somebody has this as a problem to be solved? Even before you show them, and I think from engineering perspective, and I have also some level of technical background, we are always very eager to like, even just from the design piece, like go to sketch or something and draw. Sure, and this part will come. I'll go and code this and build my prototype. Yeah, this part will get there. There's no way to build something without getting there, right? But I don't think that building something is the first step. And I think that you connect with Lee's point, like you can start talking with people, but then the talk doesn't need to be like, oh, but I don't have a prototyping yet. Sure, that's fine. But then just be careful and make clear to them what exactly the talk is about. Like, oh, let's say we're talking about professors, school teachers, right? So then if you want to test a hypothesis that they have a hard problem to communicate with students when they are offline or when they are out of school, now with COVID. Of course, now it's a little bit of a naive one because the answer is very obvious. But let's say that before COVID, if it was a question, right? You don't go there for a prototype already, assuming that they do have a problem. You may just talk with a couple of professors like, look, in your teaching experience, do you see any limitation when the students cannot go to school? And there are a couple of why they cannot go to school normally. And when does this event happen in your exercise of your profession? And some of them say, oh, that never happened with me. Good. Bye. Oh, that does happen with me. Do you see a challenge there? Is there a problem that you would be interested to solve and so on, right? Sometimes, coming from engineering background, we are very eager to talk about the solution already. But my invitation will be like, talk about the problem first. And you may learn that maybe you are, because you're feeling you are very close to a big topic, but maybe there's a topic that is very nearby that because you jumped to the solution already, you are still solving the right problem or the wrong problem, right? So my point is, I wouldn't worry too much about having the right prototyping yet for the first talk. The first talk is, who has this problem? Is there a real problem? Like, is there a job to be done here? Then you go, then you scope this group and narrow this down, and then go to the next phase of like, oh, now based that this problem really exists, now it's worth it to spend my time trying to come up with a solution. Right? Otherwise, you have like a hammer, and then you're trying to say, oh, where there's a nail, and then now I just need. It's so simple. Now I build it. I just need to find somebody that can use it. No, then that's a lot of stress and a recipe for potential failure there. I mean, the only thing I want to add is this: like, I think I agree with Liz a lot, and also with Amy, that talking with people will be the key thing, and don't worry too much about have the perfect moment. The perfect moment is when you have access to them. If you have access to them, just chat, but just know which level of the question you are and make this clear to them, right? That would be one, because that helps you to get in front of people quicker. Before you have a prototype, before you have this, before you have that, just chat.
So sticking with that line of thinking here, maybe we'll take it back from an actual solution, but to the company, right? Or to your personal brand or whatever it might be, however you approach the problem. You still need to build trust, I think, right? Because of course you can go out on the train station and just talk to random people, but then you're much more likely to have people who might not actually be your target audience, right? So for Emmy's case, seniors or people who work with seniors is people she needs to talk to. That's part of her business model, right? At least of the assumption of the business model. So how do you get to those people is by somehow convincing someone that you are worth them spending the time with you, right? So I think maybe let's talk a bit about like how much we need to do in the front end, maybe not designing the solution, but designing the brand, designing your, whatever gives you that trust, right? And how you could do that in ingenious ways, maybe if you have any suggestions, guys, other than, again, spending countless hours on logos and websites and corporate design. Like, where do we start? Where do we end? Is it enough to just have a business card and show up? Or, I think Emmy had this experience the other day. It's like someone gave the feedback. It's like, why do you not have a website? Come on, right? But is that a valid feedback? So give me your thoughts on this. And I also want to welcome Petru here. And I think he has a bunch to say about this because, as far as I know, he has done a ton of customer discovery with his business. When I saw him in Italy, he was always talking to his potential users, or at least a potential user group. And I'll let him elaborate on this. But what do you think about this? Like, how do we build trust through design, or where do we start?
Maybe before Patrick jump in, I just want to apologize. I need to leave because I have an investment meeting at 12:30.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Good luck.
But I'm very excited to see the recording later on. I think that's a great topic, and I'm amazed that you are building together a group of people that will be sharing content, sharing knowledge. I mean, I really love this environment here. I hope I can participate more often and also get to know more people. Great initiative, really appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Patrick. Thanks for popping in. All right.
So I've lost myself. So what's like the difference? No, what's the distance between like overdoing in design and actually building a brand and trust? This was like the question.
Yeah, I think like we had the question. I think that was just before or in the middle when you jumped in. Like, how much is over designing something, right? Where do we start? Do we start with conversations as much as possible before we design anything? But in order to even have conversations with our potential customers, our users or audience, I think there's a step before that to build that trust, right? To make them understand we are actually serious. We are someone who wants to solve their problems, and not just, I don't know, anyone who wants to waste their time, right? Because especially in B2B, business to business, I think that is like, time is a very precious resource for everyone. And if we ask for time, how do we make them trust us enough that they give us their time, right? And I think design probably can play a big role in that.
Yeah, so my personal experience was quite significant from this point of view. I mean, also like on what choosing to do and not to do on the design process and the communication, the branding, mostly because, as you know, I sort of was quite slow on giving birth to even the first pieces of the product. So all I actually could do is just keep talking around about it and create some motivation and see like if there's engagement or anything about that. So what I actually learned, but which was actually what I believed from the start, and yeah, some friction in the start, but actually it was that. The concept of like storytelling that then shifts to story doing, it vibrates a lot when you sort of hit the right notes of your potential users. By that I mean that, all right, okay, we talk about stuff like branding and storytelling and being cool and build trust and so on. But at the end, this is like human qualities. It's human nature to actually interact, build trust, do this kind of stuff. I mean, it's not just um, it's not sort. It's often talked about like it should be artificial and seen as qualitative stuff, but on its 360 degrees qualitative stuff. And I think that behind like whatever you build, you need to have maybe you don't have a direction, but you need to have a clear why, like some sort of, let's say, like scenic approach if you want to, which is very simple in the end, but it's so freaking strong because when you have nothing, at least what happened for me is that despite what I wanted to build, which my segment needs a lot, they didn't like hear me or build trust in me because I was trying to solve their problem, because many tried before, many failed, and many still try, and maybe they're going to be better than me, but they connected to me because of my why, right? So of why I wanted to help them, of why I thought that fighting for that through a company is actually something that one should do. So it was a principle for them, and for them seeing me connect to that principle, that they sort of how to say aggregate within their mindset. It then rang a bell that I'm hitting a sweet spot. All right. So again, for example, even the branding. So everybody I know in startups. So most of my friends in startups are all better than me. so I'm very happy about that, because it means I have good friends. I choose them right. So if I'm the weak one, it's good. And most of them actually always challenge me on what I'm saying right now. So they usually say, who gives a shit about the name, right? So it's just a name, it's just a brand. You can change it after 1 week, 1 hour, and so on. Like, okay, it's true that you can change stuff, you can reiterate and so on. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a story to say. I think you have to. And maybe you can change that, you can improve that, you can get insights, but you always have to say something that you can really deeply connect to. And for me, Wiglad was actually that. So when I was selling Wiglad, which actually means two things. So Wiglad stands for Welcome Gladiator. So refer to people with disabilities that actually fight in the arena of life each day to, architectural barriers and a lot of stuff that doesn't work from environment that we able-bodied people created for them. So it's just stupid, plain stupid. And me, as normal-bodied person, which usually instead of me, where like people with disabilities as founders, because they knew the problem, for them, seeing me, that I don't live the problem, fighting for them and calling them not disabled but fucking gladiators, that's like big for them, that said, wow. So for them it's like a clicking point. If an able-bodied tries to solve problems that usually only people like us try to solve, because only people like us see it, because we live it and we understand, we're not biased, then maybe that something good is happening. And not only, he always sees us not as weaklings that are cripples in a wheelchair, but sees us as people that are freaking fighting in an arena that we didn't choose, in a body that we didn't choose, and sees the potential in us. And then this made my users come to me. This made me, from 3, 4, 5 interviews that I was doing back then in Texas, then get a pool of 20 and test, like a really crappy MVP with 20 people that for word of mouth in like 1 month got to 200 users, like super organic, just word of mouth, because they were telling to the other guys, there's a guy that listens. So they were coming because there was somebody listening. This is like super crazy. And Iron Powell was like full of calls, because you had to do this, one-to-one qualitative time, because they wanted to be heard. And this was amazing, simply because we listened and that we believed in them. Because at the end, we have to build something, but it's through crowdsourcing, it's through decentralization, and we need them to do what we want to do. So they're our allies. So, from that point of view, Actually, for me it was an honor, but they thought it was vice versa. But for me it was super cool. So yeah, sorry for making that long, but I mean, this is like my let's say circle of concepts behind all of that. From that case, if I would be called like one of the stupid names we had was Pingu, don't ask me why. But if my name would be Pingu, then Pingu didn't have like this brilliant story behind Wiglet, you know. Pingu wasn't Wiglet. Pingu couldn't be Wiglet, and it's just a stupid name. But again, to answer your question, how far or or not to go? Well, far enough so that you connect to your users. If it takes more time, do more, but at least so that at least in terms of values, something clicks into them. If it doesn't, you need to go further. So there's no shortcuts into that. Branding is not just colors and stuff. It needs to connect to something. People need to relate to what you're doing, else it's never going to work.
Yeah, that's really powerful, I think. And we hear this come up quite a bit. Maybe that's just me because of the conversations with Liz and Marwan in our design process. But the define your why, I think. Also, Ray has said it before from the cohort 3. Is understanding your why, I think, is very, very important. There's of course plenty of literature out there on that. So I want to actually take that ball and throw it to Emmy and see, because I think you guys have completely different businesses, but also very much overlap, right? First of all, you're both in tech businesses. Second of all, Petru's customer, the people with disabilities, are not, but Petru's users are not necessarily his customers because they're not paying his bills. And I think, Emmy, like, I would love to hear how you think about this so far for your business, because I think you have a lot of similarities there. You have the elderly, you have the people who ultimately buy your products. You also, you could argue, have Mother Earth as a customer in a way. That's going a little out there. Forgive me, but I think that's a lot of the why is probably for you there, right? So, like, help us understand how you think about that.
Yeah. So it is interesting, and it's kind of tough, and I'm right in the throes of it, right, figuring it out. And I actually just scheduled like my first demo discovery day with seniors at a local facility, and like what I've talked with people about is just that being there and connecting with them and like being the person that makes them feel trusting and whatever else is what's gonna make the biggest difference for you. So that's really interesting when you're trying to build something to scale, right? That how am I going to be in every single room with every single senior? Which, it's not a problem yet, but having that come through in your branding, in your website, and your materials, I think ties a lot into that, obviously. But and then, as you said, on the same page, that's only one aspect, right? So once I make that connection with the seniors, once I have them on my side, then I still have to market my entire product. I still have to have people who want to pay for it on the consumer side. So yeah, it's a whole lot.
So now you said a couple of good things there. So the point I think I'm hearing, and I personally am the same way. I think that depends on a lot of personality, right? But I think first it's you. As early stage entrepreneurs, it's always you. It's the founder. Then we try to make that into a brand, and then we try to make that replicable, right? Like, how do we replicate ourselves? How do we replicate our message? How do we carry that message? Weglad's message, like that would be an interesting question, actually, Petru, how you did that, or if you are there yet, or how you're experimenting on that, because it sounds like it was you and your co-founder, right? Like that you guys had to be in the room. What is your approach to take that to the next step to make everyone with a disability across Italy, across Europe, across the globe, who might just not have the luxury to meet with you face to face, how do you carry that message, which is so important, that why? How do you bring that to them?
Oh, well, for example, it's a bit like connected to the model from some points of view, because as the model is like CSR challenges linked to the corporates mostly, but also SMEs. So what I'm trying to build is actually internal culture from within the companies, and that translates into the gamification of my solution that then gets to the company and creates all the process to bring new, let's say, gladiators in the arena that actually are not disabled. So my goal of communication it's like two-sided. From one side, I want to say my main target, which is people with all the kinds of mobility pains, that they are listened to, they're strong, somebody sees them as strong, and they should approach who sees them as strong and not as weak. And it's like a powerful light that they see and they want to go towards. On the other side, my other goal is that I need to explain to normal-bodied people that they fight and they're alone, but they fight because you made crappy environment for them. Now maybe you should fight to help them and to explain them that inclusion is, that we are all actually fighters, that we all have our own arena. But the cool stuff is that inclusion is about noticing the other's arena and actually joining and fight together. So inclusion is not just noticing that I have problems and maybe I notice then that somebody doesn't. That's just basic awareness. Awareness without action is just, I don't know how to call it. I would insult it I don't want to, but because it's still good. What awareness should do is like poke you into doing a better action, which doesn't. If you don't have a deep awareness, it still doesn't happen. So again, you need to do an action that. So my goal is to actually bring them both into the arena, because this is the only way I can create inclusion, real inclusion. Because else, then I would create a ghetto in my app. So it's like would be just for the disabled in this case, or just for the severely obese or elder. So they're all my targets. But let's say this kind of people, that then it's wrong. It's not that the point. So then normal body people gonna use Waze or Google. Everybody else use Wiglet. So that's not the point. Wiglet, it's not about the solution in itself. It's about creating the ecosystem in a very heterogeneous way, so that it creates inclusion first in your brains rather than the output, which is the data. This is just like the output, but not the outcome of the impact. So yeah, this is like the goal. How to scale that? I think it's pretty much inside of course, it's a lot about communication and copywriting and digital tools and so on. But I think most of the thing is actually the culture. The culture is created by putting your soul and blood into it, and I deeply believe that, because again, you see a big difference between Facebook, Instagram, and for example LinkedIn. Okay, now LinkedIn lately it's a bit dying in terms of quality. It used to be way more professional than it is lately, but it's still like way more professional than Instagram, for instance, right? So what I like, for instance, is that if you write stupid stuff on TikTok, nobody says nothing. Okay, if you write stupid stuff on LinkedIn, they say, "Hey, buddy, we're on LinkedIn here." Like it's a private club of smart people. You don't say this stuff on LinkedIn, but again, this stuff is like actually, if you think, it's actually connected to the culture that has been there since day one. You don't say this kind of bullshit here. You say it on other platforms. And everybody started saying that from the start, and they still say that 10 years after, that you don't say this stuff on LinkedIn, even though LinkedIn doesn't really represent what it had to be or what it was 5 years ago and so on. But it was the founders that tried to preach this kind of attitude. And then this went to the early evangelists so this is how Amy is going to be near all the other people, because she's going to be there in the start, and she's going to be through the first 10 people that's going to do what she does. And they're going to do that in base of how much Amy is going to be able to impact them into doing in a quite similar way that she does it with the passion that she does it. And then that message is going to spread. And that's, I think, something that you really cannot figure out and pay for it. You can pay for the reach of this message, but you cannot embody it just like that. You cannot buy that with money. So in my case, I think that this, let's say, gladiator message is something that if I'm going to be good at still continuing to develop it, at one point I can do whatever I do, but I'm not replicable everywhere to talk with everybody. But I think that, getting this 20 first early adopters and then 200 and so on, I'm going to create this first, and let's say 500 people that really believe that way and feel that way. If there's going to come one more users to the community, they misbehave, they're kicked out. They're going to say, this is the Wigla, this is not TikTok. And then they're going to come in 10 because maybe I will pay and they'll need more users, and then 100. But who cares? Because even hundreds of people are still nothing compared to 500 united people. It's like the 300 Spartans with the shield there, and nobody's going to pass, because they're united. And this unification not going to be passed by anything. They can come in thousands, but they will still think with unitary brains, not with collective brains. My user is going to be collective, and 500 is going to always beat billions because they're going to fight 1 versus 500 billions of times, but it's still 1 versus 500. So I think this is like really the key into scaling, let's say, the culture and this kind of branding message, if that makes sense.
Petra, you gave me a really interesting thought a while back, but in your experience in having a social impact business, how do you kind of navigate the line between like getting your why through and having your consumers know what your problem is and being like finger pointing, like you did this, like shame on you,
That's a really good question.
You don't want to just be like they're complaining, like, look what you did to these people, that's not going to get them to be on board with you.
Well, just rephrase that a little bit so I just get a bit more sure on how to answer that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Now, let's just going to give a separate example, right? So for co-starting, I have to correct me if if my mind going in a different direction there, but I have similar challenges. Like, I require commitment, right, to these cohorts, to these peer groups. If you do not commit, you should not be there, right? And so for me, the challenge is how much am I going to, like, how much of a hard ass am I going to be? Sacrificing me being the champion, me being the face, right? Or the brand, like, even if it's not just me, maybe it's Radu who has to be like the bad guy, right? Like, how much of the bad guy can you be to your customers or to your secondary customers without sacrificing the brand while still pushing the message forward, right? While still making sure you're not posting BS on LinkedIn. Is that kind of your question, Emmy?
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually didn't think about it from like a co-starting perspective, but it does still apply.
Yeah, I think I can say an example of what really happened, like here in Turin, like a few months ago, which is a reiteration of an example of let's say some similar scenarios. So basically, people in wheelchair, they're compared to different kinds of disabilities, they're the most angry ones. So they're very angry. They even fight between them sometimes. Very angry people because of all the mobility problems around and a lot of issues and so on. So usually when they see something that doesn't work, they get mad about that. So most of the times, if you have your your car rigged or something, it's because you park it in a bad spot and somebody in a wheelchair was really pissed off. So they really get pissed off about stuff. Now, Wheel's mission is to solve things, and to solve things, you need to understand how they really are. And this is documenting through all the application process and so on. Some of my users actually starting, posting content about things that didn't work in the city, sort of pointing the finger and being very aggressive about that. And this thing, because the community was actually quite big, I mean, how to say, 20 users is not big, but 20 users on a wheelchair that talk a lot on all the social networks and posting pictures about maybe an important building in Turin, it makes a lot of noise. This stuff made so much noise that it actually got to one of the national television. Because, I was like, I didn't know all of that, so I was actually pitching and stuff, and like next day Paula calls me and says, this stuff is degenerating, and our community is going to be on news, and if they say that it's because of Wiglad that they're shouting to everybody, then company is not going to do CSR with us, because they think that we just want to point the fingers to them, but we want to solve the problems, you know. So then we talked to the community, and what we actually discovered is that, let's say, like 20-30% of the community didn't do that, but only like the other part. Why didn't they do that? Because they say they actually joined Wiglad because they wanna, they wanna point the finger to what you should improve, not to what you're doing wrong. So to emerge in a way to succeed, let's say, to really make the environment better, you know. And then we discussed that with the community, and that wasn't clear for everybody. It just became clear. And then this kind of stuff sort of happened again at least 10 times in like less 2 months, let's say, in a very, let's say, not escalating situations, exactly because new users or old users that didn't get the concept were posting a picture about something and saying, this guy did that, and oh my God, I'm gonna say, call this and call that and so on. And then all the community, like 20 messages saying, no, we don't do this. We solve the problems, we don't create them. We don't throw trash at the companies, we tell them how to improve. And I was really amazed, because then it wasn't me doing that, it was the community doing that. I don't know if any of that answers your question, but I think it's about what you teach them to do at the end of the day, And this must be also connected with, lead by example, but it should be connected with the why, again, because the why, it's not like why you do it, but why everybody else should do it. Like a shared why, the shareable why, let's say.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that's exactly what I was talking about. So that's helpful.
That's awesome. So we only have a couple more minutes. Hi, Radu. Glad you could join us at the tail end of the conversation.
Hi, guys.
Very
Thank
cool.
you for making me the bad guy. It's very refreshing.
I saw him. Sven's like, Radu can be the bad guy. You're like, yeah. I'll go with that.
Well, I mean, it is an interesting problem, right? I think
an accent though, so
I think you need a bad guy sometimes. Like that doesn't, and I think Petru brought it nicely around. That doesn't necessarily mean you have malicious intentions, right? Like you can be the bad guy by trying, like, with the best intentions, right? I think it's just that, and this is again going back to that personality and that culture you're building for your projects, for your companies, where you guys all know me long enough that I am that guy. I'm a loudmouth German. That's my personality, and I cannot hide it if I try, right? So I need to lean into that, and I do, and that works not for everyone, but for the ones who do understand that I actually don't mean it in any bad way, right? Like I might get loud. I'm actually not meaning to. That's just that. It just unfortunately happens. That's just who I am, right? So, but once you understand that, usually you're like benefiting from it, right? Like, I mean, I'm talking about the brand now rather than myself. Also works for friends, same thing. It's hard. But I think that's a good note to end on. I think, figure out who your customers are. If you try to summarize everything in 30 seconds, who are your customers? Do they have problems, right? Include them in your entire discovery. Try to test everything. I think, Petru, you also hit very heavily on inclusion, which of course is a central point for your business. But I also think that works for a customer-centric design, right? If you think about your customers really as an inclusive part of your business, not just people who buy from you, which I think oftentimes is what the danger is, or not just people who enable you to sell something. I think that's how you get your Spartans, right? And then find your early evangelists and have them carry your message forward, and designing and building out that culture little by little, right? And I think we could go on and on for hours here, but I think, Petru, you also said something that you can't buy that stuff, but yet we have to try to design systems and methods to replicate it as much as possible, right? Because we know you are there only once. and the other people are there only once. Everyone is there just once. Now you can, of course, rent stadiums and do like Tony Robbins and just cram as many in there as possible to share your message, or you can find other ways, right? That's a design in itself. Or you can find other ways to amplify your message. So this is a good session, guys. I love it. I love it. I have so many notes always, but any last words from anyone?
You should write the cost starting yearly book, you know.
Oh, you don't want to read this. It would make no sense probably.
Yeah, you can sell it like esoteric stuff.
Yeah, once I'm dead, like
people
20 years,
will try to find the sense.
Right. Once I'm dead 20 years, they'll find my notebooks and they're like, it goes either ways. It's either like someone is trying to decrypt it, or they're just gonna be like, nothing. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys. This was a pleasure as always. We'll see you all next week.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye, everyone.
See you, Liz. Bye.